Hello, I am Mark Tucker,
Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg. We are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hello, Alan.
Hey Mark, how's things been going for you?
Busy, chaotic busy.
Oh man, I know exactly what you mean. It has been quite a week.
I was just commenting with my wife the other day that I feel like new things keep getting put on my plate, and things that should have already come off the plate have lingered. And so I'm just like, come on, I need to get some of these projects they're like at the finish line or almost. And I'm
It's
like,
just
I just
that
need to
that
get them.
that little extra. It's just you're
Yeah.
almost there.
I just need to get them done because I'm at this point where I'm juggling multiple things. And so I'm still having meetings and still having to time slice my day for different things. And it's great. I definitely enjoy the stuff I'm working on. But a few less of those things at once would be nice.
Yep, I hear you totally. No, I know that I have these projects that I'm just like, some of them have been on my plate for what seems like a long time. And I'm just like, finally, we're almost there. Almost there. Almost there.
Yeah, you're like, didn't I just say almost there last week?
Yeah,
Oh,
I know. And of course, there's just always tons of new stuff to play with, just trying to,
yes.
outside of work, get your head around some of the new things that are out there. Getting read up on what other people are talking about. There's conversational conferences happening in Europe, and just trying to listen in on what's going on with some of those. Lot going on around. But there's also some new stuff that you've been producing as well. I saw the other week that that Rain has released some stuff under their open source program, which is your work. So
Yeah, it is.
That was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
so definitely a shout out to Rain. Since I've been here, we just went through a process recently of talking about, well, what can we do to contribute more to open source and streamline that process. And so we picked one of the projects I was doing with Jovo version 4. It's a CMS plugin for Sanity. We've talked about Sanity before, and we'll give it an overview too as we go through things today. But we thought it was a good candidate for open source, and so we went through the process, and we figured out like what do we need to include in a proposal to release something as open source, and what's the process, and who needs to be involved with it at different stages, and and how do we make it so that it's got the information that we need to make the decision if this is the right choice to open source it or not, as well as let's not make it too onerous that it takes hours and hours to create this submit package to go through. So it's been a fun process to be able to work on that team that went through that, and then it was fun that my project was the first one to get picked to kind of go through the whole thing and see how it works, and we got some feedback on it, and so we're going to improve the process. But it's the Sanity CMS plugin for Jovo version 4.
Oh, fantastic! And it's great that your company does support open source in that way. I know my company, way back when we started, we had a policy of using open source where possible, and where possible, contributing back to those projects that we were part of. I've got little bits of code scattered throughout a bunch of projects somewhere. And there's never been any question that one great way, especially for relatively small companies, to give back to these projects has been to literally give back to these projects.
Yep.
Projects like Apache HTTPD is used in tons and tons of places. Tons and tons of companies use it. But what have we given back to these, to the Apache Foundation? Some companies can contribute monetarily, and that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And others contribute with contributing source. And that's also great.
And one of the things that I like about picking Jovo as the platform to contribute to open source wise is that, they've started from the beginning, they've been open source, and they've really tried to get in and understand what developers need for a framework that you can use for voice and for chatbots and even custom assistants, and trying to figure out what that looks like. And they really do rely on contributions, whether it be bug fixes or new features. And we're able to, the decision that we made with this one is that this is going to be something that is actually shipped with the Jovo framework. So you have those files already there, and you can choose to include this content management system as the one that you want to use for your projects.
Fantastic. So I don't know, you want to show us a little bit about what this is? Now folks might remember, when we were talking about content management systems a couple of months back, you had kind of brainstormed some ideas about how to fit a CMS on top of Jovo, and then how to use Sanity as that CMS. And this sounds like it's an outgrowth of that.
Yeah, it is. So it's exactly that. I was working on kind of just a side thing, learning, exploring, and seeing if it could be something that would be useful at Rain. And it's the same project that I was working on. One of the things that we the gates that we check on was, has this been used on any client projects yet? Or, have we built a client for this? And we want to make sure that code that we've built to a client, we can't open source. And so this hadn't been. It was just been kind of a side project, a learning thing to explore, and we found it useful. But we also wanted to go ahead and make sure that we open sourced it. And so if you were to go to the Jovo website and to the marketplace, you can see a list of all the different like platforms or plugins that are available. So these are the different things that you can write for Jovo, for Alexa Skills, Google Actions, chatbots, other things.
Interesting that Jovo supports Google Business Messages.
Yeah, I've never used it. It'd be interesting kind of to check that out.
It's an interesting platform. We should talk about that at some point. Yeah,
that would be fun. So here are the different clients that you can use. So like if you're going to do a chatbot or host even like a tap to talk button on a website, then they've got some different options here. You can use Vue or a straight up web client. I think there's even other examples that they had, or at least that they had in the past with React. One of the things that you can do with Jovo is plug in different databases. So this would be a list of databases, and this would be used for the user data store. And so you can use these. You can create your own, and not all of the plugins are hosted here, but they have pulled some of the ones in that aren't actually part. Like these ones are part of core Jovo framework. Like you can use Lex for ASR and NLU. They've got some things for Raza and some other NLU. And here's kind of where I've been living with the different things that I've done. So these are projects that I've contributed, but there's a link to them from this marketplace. So time zone, the community tools we've talked about, and my Badgerific plugin. But what's new down here at this section is in output and content management systems. So in Jovo parlance, a content management system is some place where you can put information and pull it out, kind of a very bare bones definition. But what you see a lot of the times is that is going to be like, if you want to, any of your strings that you're going to speak back, do it in a way that's separate from your code. And that's one of the things that you could put in a content management system. And then what if you wanted to have that localized for different languages? Then what would you do? So,
and as we've discussed a number of times, as we've looked at CMSs and what we want CMSs and conversation engines to do, this lets you do something like your designer or even an end user in some cases is able to add and change the possible responses rather
Correct.
than having to come back to the developer every time.
Yeah. So before, like out of the box, the two CMS options that are available was Google Sheets and Airtable. And so now Sanity is a possibility. And what Sanity gives you is it actually gives you an admin website and a way for developers to quickly and easily define JSON schemas that define like the different things that you're going to store. Like if it's a pet database, here's a pet object and all the information about a pet, the name, the type of animal that it is, if it's, language translation of information, what's the key to access this translation? What's the value? What's the value in this other language? What's the value if it's platform specific for Alexa or something? So those are different things that that are in a content management system. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into the documentation for the Sanity CMS, and we'll go through what this means. So quick introduction is going to tell you what Sanity is. It's a content management system. Here's an example from defining a schema. In this case, you're defining something called an article, and it has certain fields, and the title field is a string, and on the screen it's going to show the word title. So Sanity has this idea of where when you create it's a headless content management system, meaning that all the content and objects are behind an API, and then there's the data store where things are being stored. And so Sanity hosts your projects for you and gives you an API to access the projects and then the schemas or objects that you create inside of that project. And so part of that process is, it's kind of interesting, and we'll get into this, is that it creates a web project that then has the connection information to the API. And so now you're using this web project to actually define the schema. And when you run this web project, you can run it locally, or you can host it and have them run it, or you can host it yourself. But it's called Sanity Studio. And so because I defined this object of type article, now I have this article showing up here, and I can create new articles, and I can fill in these fields and publish it. And now I have an instance of that article or some content actually in my database that then later I can say, give me all the articles, or give me the article that has this information in it, or
So this is where you might define fields such as platform specifics, or that you could define any field that makes sense in your application, in what your voice agent needs to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this type called document, and that means it's going to surface it at the top level. You can also create something called an object. And so an object could be then used inside of a document, either like nested right inside the document, or you could have a different place where you define documents
and reference
or some other type, and then you can reference those. And so now with the UI, because you've got this relationship defined, you can basically pop up another window, define whatever it is, save it, it gets saved, and then it gets a reference to it set here. So it's got a lot of power in how it can create objects and relationships and things.
Okay.
And you don't have to do anything really to customize the UI. The fun thing is that it is a web project, and you can customize the UI because they give you the source code to this. But it's basically an admin project that you could use behind the scenes, where developers could create things, designers, you could make this accessible via a login, so that your clients or customers or anybody that's making the content, if you've got a quiz app, you could give this link to this website. They can log in, and they could be creating questions, for the future for this quiz app. And you get to define it. It's got a small workflow where things are by default saved as a draft, and then you could actually publish it, and then that way you can say, just give me those things that are published. And so there's quite a bit of power in what's available.
Yep, powerful standard CMS stuff. Okay.
All right. So The other important part to bring out is that now to query this information out, there is something called graph relational object queries. Or grok for short, and which is kind of funny. I kind of like the fact that it's grok and it's got the dual meanings for grok and grok, but I like that. Anyway, this query language looks a little bit like GraphQL, or it's not quite the same. It's very custom to Sanity, but it serves the same purpose. You can say this is the information that I want to query back. I want to pull in these relationships but just surface these properties off of these objects, and you have quite a bit of control over these queries. So this is going to we'll go through fairly quickly. This is like, well, how do I set up Sanity? And so I'm going to pull, the Sanity plugin, the CLI in, and I'm going to go ahead and start this, and it's going to ask me some questions, and it's going to create this Sanity Studio web project for me, and also create what the project ID and the values that I need. And so it's going to register that on the server, and it's going to put those values in my project here locally. So now I have.
So to be clear, what this is doing is you are checking out the Sanity project. So you're creating your own local instance of it that you can, that you're going to edit, because you'll be you can create new instances. You might want to tailor it for your own specific needs.
To be technical, we're installing the Sanity plugin or CLI, and then we're running the Sanity CLI, which allows us to create a project, which will then pull a template down locally and fill in all the values in that project. But then we have a web project that we can turn around and check that project into source control. That is our XYZ project.
Got it.
And so now we have the back end, and let's say that somebody's been working and they've generated all kinds of data, and the developer that's handling that side of the project is defining schemas for different things. So we've got translations, we've got basic settings, we've got pets, we've got people, we've got whatever it is that you want to keep track of in your content management system. That's already happened. So now voice developer comes in and they're like, hey, I'm using Jovo 4. Oh, this looks great. Our company is already using, or our project's already using Sanity. So we're going to go ahead and you'll create your basic starter project, however Jovo tells you to create it. And then let's say, I think I'm going to use this plugin, so I'm going to just do my npm install for the Sanity, the CMS Sanity plugin, and that imports that in. And different things that you might need from that are Sanity CMS, and this concept of transformers. We'll talk about that in a little bit later, query transformers. But first thing you're going to do, just like any plugin that you do for Jovo, you're going to register the plugin, new up an instance of it, and then this object that you're passing to it is a config object. So these are anything that you need to register. So in this case, you need a project ID and a data set to connect to that Sanity project that's in the cloud.
I was going to say, so this is basically setting up how to connect to the database that Sanity is maintaining for you.
Right.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because Sanity has two different API endpoints based on if you set it up for use CDN or not. One of their APIs actually caches every response back from the API in a CDN. So if you do a certain grok query, it's going to first check the CDN and see if the answer is already there, save you even more time. And that CDN gets updated. So like on the back end, if I add some new data to it, then it's going to invalidate the CDN, the cache. And then when I query through that CDN endpoint again, it's going to recache it and start building up that cache again. Or you can turn off, CDN, and it's just going to always directly query the data store. So that's some options over here. There's some additional options that you have that you can configure. But the important thing is that Jovo has this life cycle that goes through at different points. At one of those steps early on, there's a point where it will plug in any content management systems that you've got configured. And so this knows that that the plugin type is a content management system. And what it does is in this case, it's going to run any queries that you've got defined. You have an object here called queries. Here's a key. So translations, and then this is what you're going to do. There's, in this case, we've got a default query behind the scenes that runs, or you can just specify a string, which is the grok query. And what happens is then it's going to go through each of these keys and says, oh, I'm going to execute this query. When I get the result back, I'm going to make it available to Jovo as $CMS dot, in this case, translations.
Okay, so this is where you would put in some basic information that gets added every time.
Yeah, so every time you go through, and this is one of the things that nice about the Sanity plugin being cached behind a CDN, is that the CMS plugin gets called every time there's a request response cycle. So the request coming in, it's going to hit a step where it's going to, to hit the content management system, pull the latest things down. In this case, maybe it's the cache stuff, and make it available. And so and then use it. Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, every time a request comes in, you will be doing all of the queries that are listed in this query section. So you'll get the translations, which I assume is the list of possible translations, and
yeah. And
what does that include? The replies to the translations, or we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, we'll get to that, and you'll get to see that in a second.
Okay.
In a second, but yeah. So this is an interesting design choice, because you'll want to only include queries here that you're likely going to need every time that you use it. Yeah. Every time. Whereas other things that you might only need in certain parts, then you might want to then include the SDK for Sanity, do a grok query and query that at the point of time that you need it. So that's kind of a design choice that you need to make, as far as like, is this information that I'm going to need every time, or is it fairly inexpensive to grab this every time? Versus,
okay.
Yeah. So that is, that's definitely a choice that the developer needs to be aware of. But yes, if you have 20 queries here, then it would be 20 different queries every time that it goes through the request response cycle. All right, so that's the main point. So we talked about, and here's some additional configuration points. I'm just going to skip through that. You can read the documentation. But what you can see here are some additional queries. So in this case, the translation query transformer is querying the translation object type from Sanity. And this part here at the end means don't pick up any drafts, just only do published translations. And then what happens is that query then gets run through this transformer because there's a specific format that Jovo's looking for translation information. So it's got a special transformer that it uses.
Okay.
The simplest case, let's go down here to like the simplest case here.
Right. What
the simplest case is probably this articles.
Yeah.
This articles one is probably the simplest one. It's saying, hey, I'm going to go and find all of the articles, or all the objects, documents of type article that have been published. And that's what's going to return and assign to this articles property. And you can access it in Jovo via the Jovo $CMS articles.
Mm-hmm.
The simplest one was you could even include this part off right here and say, give me all articles, whether they're published or draft.
So the result of that comes back, how does that differ than the result of the translation one, for example? Or is the fact that you provide just a string equivalent to new translation query transformer with the query parameter being that string?
Yeah, no. So what happens is that this query, when you query this query in grok, it's going to return back JSON.
Okay.
And so that JSON could be an array, which was in this case, or in this case of site settings, there's only one site setting. And so even though it comes back as an array, I'm saying, give me the first item.
One. Yep.
And so in this case, it's an object. So in the end, grok is going to return back either a single object or an array of objects. That's what it does.
So that's just what gets stored directly.
And that's what gets stored directly. In these other cases, we're saying don't execute the query directly. Have translate query transformer execute the query, and then take the result, and before the result comes back and gets assigned, run some processing on that result and do something different to it.
Okay. Okay.
So like in this case, the key object query transformer, this is going to come back as an array. But what if I wanted
You need it as an object. Yeah.
And the thing that I wanted to be the key of my object, I can specify here, everything has an underscore ID. So you could say, this would return back, this query would return back an array. Let's say it's got 3 products in it. So now after it runs through this transformer, I'm going to have one object assigned to this, and it's going to have key, whatever the value of the ID is. So let's say it's ABC, then it's going to have a key of ABC dot, and then whatever the object is that would associate with ABC. So it's doing a flip from an array to an object.
No, so a translation is something very specific, and the translation format is a Jovo specific format. So you need some way to transform from the JSON that gets stored in Sanity to the format that Jovo is expecting.
Yeah, and so if you didn't have a CMS, the way that you would do translations in Jovo is there's a JSON object that has a very specific, it's based off of the structure for I-18 Next is the library that
they use.
It's used. And so there's like definitions of resources, and there's, so there's different, there's definitely a structure. And what I've done with this translation query transformer, it actually is expecting a very specific definition of what a translation is in Sanity. And I give you some example. I give you like some files that are, this is the schema that you'll need to use to do this as kind of a shortcut. If you want to do translations some other way.
Yep, you can build your own transformer.
You can build your own transformer.
Yeah, okay, I got it.
All right, so this is just more details about the different configuration of the plugin itself. So we talked about query, and here's a link, and you can read all about Grok and what you can do with queries. And this is saying, hey, the Jovo object, which is defined as this, you can do this $CMS dot products, and I would get my object, which is the products listed, and I could access that. So that's just more information about that. So let's talk a little bit about query transformers, and specifically about the translations query transformer. Like here's a schema definition for a translation in Sanity. So a translation is a document. That means it's going to appear at the root level. It includes a key, and that key could be just a string or a string in dot notation. And it's saying, well, here is this default entry. And so you define the key only once, but then you can define various versions or translations of that in one language or across different languages. But it says, oh, I'm going to include right inside of this document something called default, which is going to be a translation entry. And we'll look at what translation entry is, and we're going to make sure that this is required. And then there's also this array of additional entries that are also translation entries. And then this kind of is syntax that you can specify, well, how does this look like inside of the Sanity Studio URI? So what, there's a title and the subtitle, and what shows up in the title and subtitle.
Okay, so what this represents is for some kind of identifier, whatever name you choose. This is the default string for that, as well as a bunch of additional strings for various other languages.
Yeah, or if it's for the exact same language, then what it's going to do is randomly pick one from the list.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's all built into how I-18 Next works, and so you get that for free as well. So then if you take a look at, this is kind of interesting because in one case, I've included the object right into the definition of the page. And the other one, I said, there's going to be an array of these. And so now you reach out and grab those. So if I look at what a translation entry looks like, it has an object, which means I can't create it at the upper level. It has to be included in a document. It's got a field called locale. And here I define a dropdown of these are the possible things that you can pick for locale. And you could expand that to whatever languages that you want to use. Since you own the schema, you can control and morph this however you want. There's also a platform. And so I give it a list of different platforms that are available. These are defined using how Jovo defines a platform. So Alexa, Google Assistant, I think there would be one for web. And then this is the text of the translation. And that's it. So if we were to go back and look at the UI, this is kind of a screenshot of the UI that gets generated for that object. So here's an entry I created called welcome. So the key is welcome. The default included object is, I've said the locale is English. I haven't set a platform, it's not required. And here's the text, hello world. But I've also added 2 additional translations. So like if I click on add item here, a new UI shows up that includes this same information right here in a pop-up. And I can specify, oh, the text is going to be welcome Alexa user, the locale is English, and the platform is Alexa. Or I can just say English and hi. So in this case of, if I'm using this additional, if I'm using this and that's on Alexa, then it's going to pull this Alexa specific one out. If I'm not, then it's going to randomly pick between hello world and hi and give me that as, when I ask for this key, then it's going to do that. And over here, we've got another couple examples, bye, goodbye, and then here's like some A.B. So you're showing that the key can be dot notation. And what happens when that happens is that, if this were a big JSON file, then you would have the A node, and underneath that there would be a property called B, and then the B node would have,
and so
whatever the value is. And so this just talks about, the keys, just the different values that are available in a translation entry. And this is how you would use it inside of Jovo. You would just say this $T and provide the key, and behind the scenes, it will give you the value. So what happens is that there is a very specific format. So like if I were to do a Grok query and get back the answer of what all my translations look like, it's in one format. It doesn't match the format that I need. And so what Translations Query Transformer does is takes that result and turns it into a JSON object like this. En translation, this is how I18 Next structures it. And then like, here's my key, and here's my values. It's an array that will randomly pick between one of those. My key by A, B, and my 2 values that I've got for that. So that's how that works. So if you were to create all of your strings in Sanity and then use this as the plugin, then you've got things separated from your code and your text translation. Somebody else can do that. You could have as fancy of a workflow as you want. You can even have things, since Sanity is an API, you can have other workflows that will push content into Sanity and then that would be available. You can do whatever you want with Sanity behind the scenes, but this would give you all of the different translations that you need.
Okay, very cool.
So any questions? Yeah, any questions about how you could do translations with Sanity and pull that into Jovo?
No, it makes perfect sense. And again, I think what my understanding was, I didn't get that Jovo has a specific translation format that it expects. So this is why you needed to do that mapping. Whereas for other values that you may use, it's okay to leave them in the native object format, or build a translation into a format that you care about. But you didn't need to. Nope, I'm good so far.
All right, excellent. So the next part, and we've already kind of briefly talked about this, what the key object query transformer does. But here's the key object query transformer. You have to pass in a key. That key has to be a property that is on an object that's in the array that comes back as this result. So in this case, we've changed whatever, the structure is that was stored or queryable from Sanity using Grok into this format where now, here's this case. This is what the Grok result might look like. There would be some sort of an ID. The type is a product. Here's the name. It's a Sharpie. And this isn't necessarily the best example because you wouldn't necessarily use a GUID as a property value, but you could.
Well, I could easily see where there are cases where you would, if either here or somewhere else you've mapped.
True.
If you've got a slot, for example, and you've defined that this is the slot name, and you've gotten a bunch of aliases that you've defined for the slot, for example.
Yeah.
This might be a useful way to do that. Or if you are selling stuff using Amazon sales properties, and this might be the AID, because you need to look up the AID because that's what Amazon is giving you.
Yeah.
So I can
see that, because what you would do if you didn't have that and it was still in the array form, then you would have to do a find, find the ID that equals this, and then every place that you needed to do this, you'd have to do a find first to see if the object's there, test if the object came back. Whereas now you could just do if $CMS dot what is this product dot whatever the value is, or even like bracket syntax with the key. You can see if it exists, and if it does exist, then you could just use the value from it. It does save you some. If that's the way that you're using it, then this would be the case of why you'd want to convert an array into an object. Would just be easier.
It's an easier local lookup. So once you have this chunk of data, it's one line to look it up rather than two or three, and it may not always be obvious what these two or three lines are trying to do. Okay.
Yeah, so all it does is it switches it around. It doesn't change the original object. That's still the value. So you'll have the ID in both places, but now you can access it with the key with whatever property you define. So like name wouldn't be a necessarily good thing because there could be spaces in it, and there could be maybe duplicate names.
Right. So name is a display name of some sort, maybe, or this is a very common thing that needs to be done, in lots of programming environments, because when you store them, in a lot of ways, it is just easier and better just to store them as a list, because you may want duplicates, you may want to, speed of updating, whereas when you're getting them out, you want to have that quick lookup.
Yeah.
And a map or an object provides that kind of quick lookup, while an array does not. Yeah. But I'll have more questions on that in a second, I think. So
well, and then this would just be how you would use it. So this $CMS product, and this is the key, or if the key was something else that was easier, you didn't have to use this syntax, you could access it directly in here. So there's you have some options. The last part in this document is just talking about, there's two, and the great thing about this is being open source is that you can go look at Jovo framework and go find this plugin and say, oh, how did this query transformer get implemented? And you have a couple of examples of how query transformers work. And then we expose the base Sanity query transformer class, which means you can create your own. So basic thing is it's always going to accept a query coming in as the config, because in the end it's going to the Sanity plugin code is going to execute that query, and then it's going to check to see if this is a transformer or a string. If it's a transformer object, then it's going to call the transformer on it. It's going to call the execute method on the transformer and return back whatever it is, and it's going to return back. So it can return back either an object or an array of objects, and you can do with it what you want.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I feel like one of the things that I'm a little bit stuck on, perhaps, and this is some of this is definitely my bias coming from my work on multivocal, is the key transformer makes a lot of sense but I feel like it doesn't scale because, if you've got 1,000 product, that means that every time you're issuing the same query, and even though it may be hitting the CDN, it's still 1,000 things that you're getting back, which takes time. And all you're getting out of it is one or two things.
True.
So this is, so I feel like if you've got a limited number of things, if this is, just you're keying against slot values, you don't have 1,000 slot values usually, not always, but usually.
Yeah.
That kind of makes, that seems like an appropriate use for it. But I worry that developers being developers who are always looking for the easiest solution.
Yeah.
Will do something like run that query every single request and then start wondering why it's taking 7 seconds for.
Yeah. Where did my 7 seconds go?
Right.
Exactly.
So that's, I feel like that, but as you said, if that is an issue, the solution is, okay, you embed the Sanity API yourself, you make that call, and your grok just says, give me the results for this ID. And you'll just get back the one or the small list of things that ID applies to.
Yeah, and actually what I just had an idea of how to improve this actually. So one of the things that we could do is we could add a new parameter as part of this that would indicate that you don't want it to be executed, but you're basically giving it a name so that later on in your code you can just say, Sanity, give me this thing. You don't have to worry about the SDK for Sanity. You're just asking the plugin, because we do have an object or a way that we could get access to it. We could just say, give me the result or execute this query now, and it would give you the query, or it would do the query and then transform the query, and then so you could delay. So that'd be interesting to have like a delay or a no execute flag. I'm not sure exactly what the great name would be, but you could then specify that these are, you're configuring all of these, but not all of them are necessarily running
right.
At start. So that's a good idea. I like that.
Right. So basically it's something that in your handler you can access, but it's not accessed until you specifically do so. Right. And maybe you'll pass parameters to it at that point, or maybe it pulls parameters from elsewhere in the lifecycle object.
Yeah.
Or something.
That
makes sense.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea to check into. So I think that is it for the definition, just showing you how to write your own.
So this is very exciting. I mean, this is, this is some pretty cool stuff. And what I think I like about it is that it builds on top of things that people will already understand about how Jovo does things. So You're not radically changing things. You're just saying, look, you're already doing these things with Jovo. Here's how you do them with Jovo plus Sanity. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. So like something that's interesting, like for example, you could start off, and this is the way a lot of people do start off, is you can say, I have, I'm just going to use Google Sheets. And so you start off with Google Sheets, and this is talking about like, in the case of translation, here's my key, here's what it's in English, here's what it is in German. And you're like, that makes sense for me. And that's good. And you're thinking, well, I like that. And there's no reason why you couldn't do this part using using the Google Sheets CMS, and then have other things use the Sanity CMS. There's no reason why you can't have two CMSs.
So it just means you don't load the translation object in on the Sanity side. What happens if you do both?
You just don't define.
What happens if you do have this is the translation and the Sanity is a translation? Do they supplement each other?
The second one's probably going to over. Well, I don't know. Actually,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask the tricky question.
Yeah, you did. Here. Well, I was going to say I think it overwrites it, but I'm not necessarily sure, because I think I remember some code in there where it's checking to see, does this key exist? If it doesn't, then add it and add the stuff. So it might in essence do a merge. That would be an interesting test.
That would be great, because then what you have is you've got the ability. Well, you've got the ability to have, one group create the defaults. This is the absolute fallback definitions, and then you have the CMS that anybody that you can use. That you open up to the designers, the customer. And if the customer, for whatever reason, forgets to add something, well, your designer has set it up already in this other place that the customer can't accidentally delete.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'll have to when I have a spare moment, do that.
Oh, a spare moment. Didn't we open this show by talking about how we don't have spare
yeah,
moments?
We did. We talked about that, didn't we? I don't really have a lot of spare moments. Sorry, I was just trying to scroll down here to try to find, here is an example as well that Sheets has this concept of Sheets, but it's in this case, if you define your spreadsheet a certain way to do translations, then you use the translations sheet to convert it into, whatever the API that goes against Google Sheets gives you into what you need for Jovo's, IT Next implementation. But there's a key value sheet, there's a key object sheet, an object array sheet. And so then, you've got, depending on which CMS you use, there might be different of these things that you can wrap around results to do different things to get them into certain formats.
So very cool. And congratulations again on getting this, having your company make this available to everyone.
Yeah, it's been fun process. I enjoyed doing the code. Two, I enjoyed being involved in the process of how we were going to open source it, and then to have mine selected, which was really cool. And Jan and Alex were very, very appreciative, and got lots of recognition on Twitter for an appreciation that way for doing this, and looking forward to other things that might be able to do, either personally on my side projects to add to Jovo, or maybe another contribution through Rain.
I'd love to hear how other people are using this, or what other things people are looking for in this sort of thing. As always, folks can, since this is a project on GitHub, right?
It is, and it's part of Jovo, and there's, you just have to go to the Jovo docs and type in contribution, and it will tell you how would I add something to this project or any other part, and whether it be a bug fix or a new feature. And so, there's a process where you go through, and then it gets approved and reviewed, and next release of Jovo, your changes will be there.
So people can open issues. People can reach out to us on social media, on Twitter, LinkedIn. As always, the comments below. Any other final thoughts, Mark?
Nope. It's just get involved with open source. It's been a fun experience.
Agreed. So look forward to seeing what folks are doing another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
Have a great week, Mark.
Thank you.